Well, I'm going to speak today about Chinese railroad workers on that western portion of the first transcontinental line. Most Americans know that Chinese worked on the railroad, period. And that included myself. There's not much more you can say about it other than they worked on the railroad, and that was one of our early celebration of diversity in American history. But most of us, and those of us in the project, I'm the co-director of the project on Chinese railroad workers in North America, in which we're trying to recover this history. When we began that history, we were in the same situation. We knew about Chinese railroad workers, period. And we didn't know very much about them at all. We didn't even have one name of one of the workers. And I think that's still the situation for most Americans today, and this is something we want to remedy. We know very little about them. We didn't know how they got hired by the railroad. We didn't know how they lived on the railroad line. We don't know how many died. We don't know how many worked. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know how they took care of their bodies when they were injured and sick. We don't know what happened to them when they died and where they were buried or where were they sent back. And these are just two books, small, kind of almost personal, vanity published books of people who tried to understand some of these questions. And you can see by the titles, this is still certain of the challenge. They were nameless, even to these people, or they were silent. They have no voices from them. Because to this day, we don't have a single document, a single line of words from any of the railroad workers. Not one document. We don't have an oral history. We don't have a memoir. Nothing from them. And we consider at the time around the Civil War, tens of thousands of diaries of soldiers, even of people who were born in slavery. We have their oral histories that were taken in the 1920s and 1930s by the WPA, but nothing from the Chinese railroad workers themselves. So this is the challenge. This is the challenge. How can we recover the experiences of those who left no records? Nothing from their own hands. How do we construct a history without documents from the workers themselves? How do we answer some of these questions? So it's really a challenging intellectual and scholarly challenge to us. And so we had to come up with new methodologies. We're looking, as a historian, historians are very text-based. We look for the documents. But sometimes we can't find them. And so what do? We know the history is there, but what do we do to try to access it? It requires new ways of trying to understand the past. Well, we are looking through traditional documents, and go through some of this quickly here. We're looking we've tried to locate payroll records. We've now found hundreds of pages of the Central Pacific Railroad Company payroll records. Many were lost because of the 1906 earthquake and fire in San Francisco. The Central Pacific earthquake, or the Southern Pacific at that time, was destroyed. And so a lot of their archives, their documents didn't survive, but much did. And so we have uncovering these things. And a lot of the stuff are still sort of popping up in regional and local libraries in California, and this California State Railroad Museum Library, which they're still trying to, there's just mountains of this material they're trying to understand. The Southern Pacific Railroad, which bought the Central Pacific Railroad, had thousands of boxes of archives, which they were going to destroy a few years ago, and Stanford and some other, and UC Berkeley obtained these, and Stanford has something like 5,000 boxes of railroad records. So we're trying to go through them, and who knows what we'll be able to find. But so we're beginning to find some of these documents. These are things which individual researchers couldn't do themselves because they just didn't have the people power. But we're beginning to find railroad records, and which includes some cases we can find some of their names. But as I said, some of the names, you can look for Chinese names, they will appear, and some of them appear as cook or foreman or some other designation here. You can see here, there are a few names here. It looks like a Bing, a John, a Hing, and they're all cooks here. Now, there are others here. Now, they all seem to have the first name A-H. Well, that's not really a first name. That was a familiar term. So this was kind of like, the translation would be like brother. Brother Bing, Brother Fong, Brother Li, or something like this. They're all very close. Many of them were, in fact, related. They were from similar clans. In the southern China, the way the villages are organized, they're often clan-based. And so they would come over as groups of cousins and extended family and continue to work together. And so they would just call each other all these. And so the company didn't know them any different because they said, who's this? Oh, this is Ah Wing, this is Ah Fong. So this is how we find them, but we don't know anything more about them. We wish we did, because then we get last names. But these are all familiar names, Assam, and all down here you can see all these Ahs. Company records, they will talk about the kind of work that was done, and the calendar, the sequence of work. These all had to be reported back to Congress. Or trying to make correlations between when this task was done and when they began to hire workers, and when workers are located or identified in the payroll records and so forth. Here's another, the census figure here. Again, the census figures. You see, look at they're all Ahs. We don't know who these guys are. But that's the way they were identified to each other. And then we're also looking through families. We're trying to locate family members to people today who've done genealogies, who may have had something inherited from the past of 150 years ago. And we're finding, interestingly, families who do have things. But also, we're finding documents and other sources, including the National Archives. Some of you know there were very stringent Chinese immigration acts that restricted Chinese entry into the country after 1882. Because of those restrictive acts, and there was still travel back and forth, when Chinese did come and go in limited amounts, they had to go through very stringent interrogations. And because of these interrogations, the federal government collected voluminous records about family identities. They were trying to figure out who all these Ahs were, all these Chinese who were coming in and out of the country, some fraudulently, some legally, to get in the country. So you'd have to go through a screening process to verify that you are eligible to come into the United States. And therefore, people back in the 1890s and up through 1940s had to go through these interrogation processes. And in the federal governments, we have lots of these records of family. And in them, we go through and find out, oh, someone says that this is the child of so forth, and his or her father was a railroad worker. So very laborious work to try to identify these people.